Hey, it's Chris, Liege Games. Shout out to people that don't know I exist, but I love your shirts. Definitely my simplistic minimalist nature. So, what are we talking about today? Now, we all have a bunch of games. Bunches and bunches and bunches of games. Games that we go, well, if it's this condition, I'm going to play this. If this is the right condition, I'm going to play this. If I'm in the mood for this, I'm going to play this. And if I'm in the mood for that, I'll do a little bit of that. But when it comes down to it, especially from the review side of things, right? This is always the question. I'm always amazed by people that are putting out as many reviews as some other channels do. I'm always amazed by that because there must be playing a ton of stuff. But the question when I see that always I come back to is, what do you play when you're not reviewing? Right? I've had a couple of you ask me that. Like what do you actually like? We've heard your tastes. We've heard some of your opinions on things. You like this type of thing. You don't like worker placement. You like dice rolling, that sort of thing. But when it comes down to it, like, if you give me my choice, like, reviewer hat off, throw it in the corner, stomp on it a few times, and come over and say, Chris, what do you want to actually play? What is a game that you just can't get enough of? Well, let's talk about that. This is probably going to be an ongoing series because I don't know if I can necessarily look at my collection and go, yeah, clearly this, clearly that, clearly this. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, these are five games that are never going to leave my collection. Sounds simple, right? Well, kind of. Because those are some pretty hefty words nowadays, especially with the emphasis on collector versus player versus both. Like, as you guys have heard me ramble and rant in the past, I've really changed my focus in probably the year or so before I started this channel of changing what I was getting in terms of what I liked versus the dichotomy of what I can actually get played. Because there is definitely a Venn diagram of both of them overlapping, but there are also distinctly separate ones. Otherwise, I would have gotten a game like Monster Hunter from Steamforge. Love the idea of it. Love the concept of it. Never going to get it played. So things like that are, a little bit outside. But going back to the topic, what are five games? If you go, Chris, these are never going to leave your collection. You feel that strongly and passionately about them. Well, let's talk. Let me show you into this crazy mind of mine of things I go, wow, I'm always happy to play this. This is never going to leave my collection. I'm willing to make time for this whenever you want to play it, essentially. They fall under all of those broad categories because that's essentially what a game that's never going to leave your collection almost doesn't have to have, but is almost always going to have. So let's just run through this really quickly and let me know what you think. Because some of these are going to be your ilk. Some of these are going to be complete misses for you. But we all have those games. So what are your five as well? Number one. This should be no surprise to anybody. This was one of the first reviews I did for my channel. This was my best game of 2020. My favorite game. It's The Loop. It's The Loop. And it's just a classic tale as old as time itself. The cooperative in the pandemic style and sense. Done with a slightly different twist. You're time-traveling agents trying to stop Dr. Fu. I have the Dr. Fu version. I'm going to always refer to it as Dr. Fu. And some people are just not going to like this game. I don't know where other people stand on this. I know a lot of people have liked it, but this whole little tower thing in the middle where you're dropping the cubes from, people are going to hate that. Some people are just going to hate that. The randomness and the inability to mitigate where those cubes are going to go once you drop them is going to drive people crazy. But I love it. I love the manipulation of the tokens. I love the crazy thematically incorporated weapons and items that you're getting that correspond to the eras that are around the board. It all just works smoothly. It is one of, and you'll know why I say that in a few minutes, my favorite cooperative games, period. Because it's also difficult enough that it is not a romp in the park, even harder than most pandemics. but it's also easy enough to teach the basic premises of that you don't need to be much deeper in the hobby than Pandemic in the first place to be able to play it. And it's just kind of a fun, unique mechanic. How many games do time travel as a mechanic? Not many. It's actually an underutilized thematic board game representation, which is kind of weird because you'd think that, given its predilection and presence in modern nerddom and sci-fi-ness and fantasy realms, that you would see more of it. But we don't see a lot of it on the board game side of things. It's just a beautiful combination of simplistic twists on the cooperative side of things that can be done out there. And the most exciting thing about this is there's going to be an expansion. Foozilla. Sometime in 2022. And I could not be more pumped to have more variety, more modularity with the loop. And that's clearly just why it's my number one on this list. Now, again, these are in no specific order. So what's second? This is, and let me be clear on this list. I'm going all over the place. I am not sticking to one genre, one mechanism, one game type. But the second game on this list is Hive, particularly Hive Pocket, because it comes with Mosquito and the Ladybug expansions. If you're not familiar with this is, I will say, going through Board Game Geek, if you have any interest in abstracts and what can be done with abstracts in general, this is the game. This is, I will argue with you, the best abstract non-chess Go shogi game on Board Game Geek, period. There are strategy guides for this game. And when people ask, what game do you think people still will be playing in 50 years? This is on my short list of games. Period. It's that good. I mean, it says all the rules you almost need to know on the page right here. Surround your opponent's queen. That's all you got to do, right? Sounds simple. Well, not so much, right? Grainy quality, Board Game Geek pictures here, but all of these different insects have different powers in terms of how they can maneuver around the hive that is the mainstay of the game in the first place. This game is the elegant simplicity maximized to an absolute crescendo of gaming excellence. The amount of variety of insects, the combination, and the strategy involved is just like blossoming. Because as you start playing, you start to go, oh, well, this is only how I get this. And then, I kind of get stuck here. And then all of a sudden, it's one of those games where something clicks and you go, oh, I could do this to get out of this position. Or I can do this to change this position. And it just opens and blows the doors apart in terms of the possibilities and the combinations and the difficulty. There is nothing like it that I have played from the abstract side of things. There is a reason it is so highly regarded in that sense. And it's a game, especially with the pocket version, that can travel anywhere and play anywhere on any flat surface in a small area. That's never going to leave my collection. Now, again, with number 3, this one is going to probably surprise people a little bit. But if you've been a long-time viewer, this one is not going to be a surprise because, as I said at the beginning, I love me some dice. The other reason that this game is on the list is because it is so very accessible. Also, it's one of my wife's favorite games. She's good at it, but she just enjoys it. And when you have a game that someone else really enjoys, that you enjoy as well, that is the makings of a staple. I am like 1 for 25 in this game in terms of winning. But you know what? If somebody wants to play this, I will play it every single time. That is another classic hallmark of the commonality of the games on this list. I mean, it's space-based, right? It's rolling 2 dice, getting either reward based on the individual numbers or the sum of them, and trying to build your engine based on the probabilities of the die rolls from a central marketplace. It's that simple. Now, all of the little mechanisms and the nuances and the changes that come with the base game and how you can manipulate those numbers, amplified by the Shy Pluto expansion, and also going to be amplified even further with the Terra Proxima expansion sometime in 2022. Again, it just works. You can argue whatever flavor of this simultaneous resource gathering type game that you prefer, whether it's Machi Koro or Space Base or Valeria Card Kingdoms or one of the other ones. This is my preferred ilk, especially with the dice rolling. So there is a little bit of slight strategy, but there's also a lot of chaotic controlling goodness. And just, a little bit of anybody can win. And I love that element of things. The strategy is there, but it's more tactical at the same time. Is it the most deep, scientific, expert game? No. But that's also what makes it fun. Is the randomness and the improbability of getting 3 or 4 12s that are going to all of a sudden propel you ahead when you're rolling dice, when it shouldn't statistically be able to happen. But it does. And that's the same element and mechanism in a most general sense that makes Catan as popular as it is in the first place, right? With the die configurations, the numbers placed on each of the settlements and the resources, so that you get resources that way. So the unpredictability gives a anybody can win this sort of vibe, which is very attractive, especially for the casual audience. It's no fun if you're pulling a game out that's new, or a game that you're playing with people who are not familiar and your experience gives you head and shoulders advantage over them without any ability or chance to win. And some people like that, but it's also about the camaraderie and the experience on the table. And that's what this game has in spades. And that's why, in combination with those other things, it's on my list of things never going to leave my collection. Number 4. Again, we're going to go with a grand departure, excuse the dad pun, on number 4. And I'm going to give credit because the reason I'm wearing this shirt, actually, it ties in very well, because I never had any interest in this game until I randomly came across Shut Up and Sit Down's review of the original El Grande. It was captivating, the simplistic nature between my aesthetic tastes, like I mentioned at the beginning, talking about my t-shirts or my posters or whatever it may be, of the minimalist components design, in combination with the easy to get to the table and the significant depth that is second to hardly any, even a decade or more later when it comes to this game. This game is a classic for a reason. It doesn't need shiny deluxeifications. It doesn't need boatloads of plastic. It does it just as well with small wooden cubes of various rainbowish colors. The turn order with the bidding simultaneously in that sense to draft the card that you want is engaging, it's enthralling, and it captures the chaos but gives you more control at the same time, where your fate may be more dependent on what you're willing to gamble rather than somebody else's random roll. And that makes it appealing to more strategic gamers rather than just the random chaoticness that I tend to enjoy a little bit more of as well. And that's not even to mention, as I pulled the picture up here of being the big box with the 6 expansions. You could pull out this game a dozen or more times, play it very thoroughly, have a completely different experience with a meta, with an evolving area control, influence, decision-making group, and never feel the need to pull out one of those expansions as well. And that is another great sign of a classic game. Don't get me wrong, like I said with Space Base, like I said with the Loop, I love some additional elements, like I'm going to say on the next game, the last game on this list. But there is something to be said of having a full, complete experience and being completely satisfied and being able to be completely satisfied with just a game like this in the first place, that you don't also need to read a 20 or 30 page rule book to get a glimpse of what the strategy might be or what the complications and nuances and interactions are going to be with a lot of these games of same mechanistic flavor nowadays. I mean, when was the last time you saw an area control game with like 5 pages of rules, right? Everything nowadays has 15, 20, 30. Because you got to have gameplay example this to clarify this, and then we have to have example A to clarify sub-rule B in terms of section C's exemption to sub-rule A. And it's just nice not to have to deal with that you can look at this game and pull it out and remember how to play it without having to try and read the rules to remember all of the nuances in the first place. This is a great game. This game needs to get reprinted. It's just that good. And more people need to be able to experience it. So that's why it's on my list. Last up. If you didn't hear this one coming, well, I probably haven't talked about it too much because I just haven't had the chance to. Because everybody and their brother's cousin's son in the hobby knows about Spirit Island. That like $86,000 funded originally on Kickstarter game that has vaulted up to be arguably one of, if not the best cooperative game out there on the board game side of things. I can't even imagine, and they actually detail it, I think, in the forums, especially when they were talking about making the expansion, Jagged Earth, the nuanced gameplay, the balance, the amount of testing that had to go into this to make sure that it was clearly what it needed to be. And just the design aspect of that, when you step back and think about it from that element, because if we go back to this picture here, these are all the spirits from the base game and Branch and Claw and the promos, which all kind of came out right at the same time on the Kickstarter. And to balance that many, and this is not just like balancing like one player ability, like, you know, Arcadia Quest or Marvel United, or making sure just one card isn't slightly too overpowered. But if it is, maybe you'll never see it, or maybe it'll only come out once in a while, and maybe you'll have something else to slightly mitigate it in terms of other overpoweredness. This is 12 uniquely different, totally play style unique spirits that are balanced not only from a this is good for this type of player, this is good for this type of learning, but also this one isn't dramatically more powerful or better overall to be able to defeat the game. And that in and of itself is a design masterpiece or masterclass in how to do things in the first place. It's a hard game, but it's also a fair game. A fair game in the sense that you are in control of a lot of your destiny. And it's also taking one of the best things in the cooperative of being able to play together and being able to mitigate a significant portion of the biggest concern that comes with cooperative games in the first place of quarterbacking, where the elements are so, I don't want to say just complex, because that doesn't have quite the same meaning that I'm going for here, but you'll understand what I'm saying. The complexity of each individual spirit and the gameplay of each individual one, while still being complex and deep, is not necessarily analysis paralysis overwhelming, but it's enough, and this is a very, very fine line to tread, that it does not allow for you to necessarily dictate at the same time or have the ability and the bandwidth, unless you are, that's a whole nother discussion, the bandwidth to take over other people's turns if that tends to be how your group plays or how you try to play or you found yourself, unfortunately, doing in similar style cooperative games. And it just works. The variety of the spirits, the ability to play different scenarios against different invaders. And to do that again all over with Jagged Earth here, with even more mechanisms. And again, with something like this that is so high, you would expect, to have almost a letdown, a potential huge letdown, a la, high is the bar that's set after the first iteration. And then often there is this letdown afterwards of sequels. I'm looking at you, The Matrix. where that is arguably, in my opinion, one of the best movies ever made. The trilogy, however, kind of tarnishes that a little bit. I mean, I love it still. I love me some Neo, Keanu Reeves. But the bar set by the first one, the second and the third did not meet that. And yet, here we find ourselves with Jagged Earth meeting and even exceeding what people were hoping and expecting for. It is just a tremendous, tremendous masterclass, as I've said, in how to do things and how to put things out there from a consumer basis. And I am not one of those people that was like sold on this game in the first place. My first 2 plays of Spirit Island were an utter, complete disaster. Train wreck, car pile up on the highway. Completely screwed it up, tried to teach it for the first time while playing with 4 people, or myself included, and it went horribly. We didn't know half the rules. I couldn't explain it properly. It was too complex. I just didn't have an understanding of it. Shelved it for over a year, almost 2. Then went on a vacation, decided to take it with me and, try it solo just to see. I said, I need to know whether or not this is good or not. Played it solo once and I was like, okay, I kind of get it. Second solo play, it clicked. Boom. Oh, light bulb. And that's another commonality that all of these games have. That light bulb moment of wow. Wow. And that's different for everybody, but this does that in all the right tunes and keys for me. And that's why it's never going to leave. Now, I'm going to give you a bonus one. This is going to be a bonus game, and you're all, probably wondering at the end of this list, why are we even talking about this? Because this, as weird as this seems, if there are any parents out there, if any of you have played games with kids, this is a game called Pengaloo. It's nothing to write home about. You've got 12 wooden penguins. You put 6 different colors of eggs. There's 2 eggs of each color, and you put them under these penguins. You shuffle them all up, and then you roll dice to try and see if you can find the colors of the dice color that you rolled. Said it. It's memory in a slightly different way with dice. However, this one is also never going to leave my collection because I have played this nearly 300 times with my kids as one of the first board games we ever started to play when they were 2 years old. My 6-year-old is still intermittently requesting it. This will be the first board game that I play with my 15-month-old when he is old enough. The nostalgia, the sheer joy I get from watching them play it, and the sheer joy that they get when playing it back then, and even somewhat now, I can't express how that makes me feel and how enjoyable that is to see that level of excitement. That's why this game is always going to stay in my collection. Again, it's nothing that's going to break the bank on Board Game Geek. Most of you have probably never heard of this game. You'll never see a copy of it. But the sentimentality, the sheer joy that this has brought my family and my ability to share my love for board games with my kids is second to none. And so that's why this game, no matter how old my kids are, will never leave my collection. Period. There you go. That's it. Part 1 of games that are never going to leave my collection and why. I don't know how often I'm going to do something like this. I have no clue how many games in my collection are even under this. But I think it's worthwhile to talk about because, again, giving you guys a little bit of insight into what do I really like? What do I play when the camera's off and no one cares? This is the stuff. And it's the stuff that I really really enjoy. So, there you go. Let me know what it is for you. I mean, like I said, there are probably plenty of others in my collection like this, but these are the ones, especially as the first in this video series, maybe, that stood out head and shoulders. So, there you go. Thanks for watching. Thanks for clicking. Stay classy. Have a great day. I'll see you around. Heartstrings right there on that last one. No lies. All the right feels.